Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. My name is Ola, and this is the Real Happy Hour podcast. And today we're going to be bouncing around films around black representation in films, and we'll also talk about the integration of social media in films. And I've got an amazing guest today, and we will just have a great conversation and talk about the films we really enjoy, the films we critique, and the films that we'd like to see more of in terms of representation. And as the name of the show sort of connotes, we've got drinks here. I've got a nice cocktail here that I'm going to be having all through the show, as it's a real happy hour. And I think Dr. Neosho's also got one over there, and we're just going to be having a great time. So let's get right into it. Let's get right into it. So thank you for coming onto the show. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Today's been a great day, and I'm very happy to be having this conversation with you. So let's just start from um, how do we experience black representation in film? Because obviously I'm Nigerian African, you're American, Native American, and the way we
Oh,
receive
I'm Black American.
Black American,
Yeah.
I stand corrected. Um, and so the way we receive films probably different, probably the same, but I'd just like to know your
Mhm.
experience of black representation in film and how you know see it.
Okay. So, two things real quick. I don't have a cocktail because it's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I live in Washington, D.C. And I have water that is infused with ginger, mint. Gosh, there's a lot of stuff in here. Ginger, mint, cucumbers, and lemon. So that's
Oh,
what I'm drinking.
nice. Mine is Pepsi and Absolute. It's like
Pep-
8 p.m. here, so I'm a vodka
Pepsi.
kind of guy. So I don't
Pepsi.
drink. Yeah, Pepsi.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's blasphemy in parts of this country. But
Well,
yeah, so I have a master's and PhD in media. I teach variations of intercultural communication and media. So when I think about representation, which is what I got both my master's and PhD from Howard University, and that is a huge part of our I guess our curricula throughout the School of Communication when you're looking at media, and not just any form of media. Let me be very clear. It's not just film, right? So I when I think about representation, and I want to make sure I'm answering your question directly, but I had to do some sort of intro of myself because I want people to know, like, that I can talk about this stuff from a scholarship perspective as well. But what we find is that the lack of representation has greatly affected how people see themselves in real life, right? So if you don't see yourself in the commercials, right, in film, on television shows, in magazines, then you don't have that. You don't feel like you see yourself when you look in the mirror. So when you have films like Black Panther and Wakanda Forever, and you see this all black, like 99% of the cast was black of African descent, then it inspires young people to want to strive for better, and to think in a more have a more, if you will, regal mindset, and not settle, right? So Hollywood, unfortunately, has done an amazing job of suppressing black representation in film, and it dates back to them destroying the first black filmmakers. Reels, Oscar Micheaux, and so many of his footage and many of his films were destroyed in a fire, and it was not a an accident,
mhm.
and we that goes kind of without saying, and you don't have to have proof. Like, it was a sign of the times. And while D.W. Griffith was credited with creating the first full feature length film historically, Oscar Micheaux had done that prior to Birth of a Nation, but there's no proof of that, right? We just know it happened. And so when you look at how we look, and how we are portrayed today, you can't start with today. You have to go with the historical context of black representation in film. So for those viewers and listeners who have not are not familiar with the history of film, you look at Birth of a Nation, that was aired on at the White House at the time, right? In here in America, and it was 1895, and it's credited with being the first full length feature film, and it's really a mess, right? To be honest with you, but it's really about the Ku Klux Klan terrorizing Black people, and how black men in the film were looked at as animals, attacking white women, raping white women, and but what's the catch to that is there are no Black people in the film.
Hmm.
So you wonder, right? How are there no Black people in the film about Black people attacking, white women and things like that? And it's because of blackface. So this is when we had I know we had seen blackface in other forms of media like advertisements in newspapers and also magazines, but it hadn't been shown like this. And to show Black people serving in various capacities in a courthouse, and they're serving, and then they're taking off their shoes, and they're eating watermelon and chicken. So when you see when we talk about being offended by portrayals, and how we're being represented in certain forms of media, it's because it was used against us. Foods that we hold dear and dear and true to us, it was used against us. So you had, like I said, white people in blackface, portraying these characters, and they're eating chicken wings and throwing the bones in the courtroom, and eating watermelon and throwing the rinds, and things like that, and just being savages. And that's what the film really portrayed, Black men and Black people in general. So then,
Can I ask a
um,
question actually?
yeah,
Because I know there was a Birth of a Nation that was done by Nate Parker.
yeah,
Is that the same movie or a
no,
completely different
absolutely
movie?
not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. So,
Similar story or no?
no. I mean, no, no, not at all. So the Birth of a Nation with Nate Parker, that's a separate, when it comes to representation, it's a whole different thing. Because I do believe there was a lot of sabotage to his career.
It
He
was
played a little bit of a
intense.
role. Nate ain't perfect, but there was a lot of sabotage to his career. I lost a friend because of him.
Oh
Like, I
wow.
don't believe he's a rapist, and she to this day has not talked to me since, because I guess she is a survivor. And
Mm.
but I'm like, but he ain't rape you. Like, I just didn't understand how people were so quick to, anyway. So,
And you
but
need to be able distinguish the art from the person too. Like, you may not like the person, but the art has a message. And
I watch the Cosby Show every day.
there you go. Same here. I grew up with the Cosby Show, like, and
No,
R. Kelly's
to
music.
this
But,
day.
even though R. Kelly is very, very problematic and all
Oh
of them
no,
used to
that's
be
a
R.
whole nother
Kelly.
situation. And okay, so we'll really quick do this sidebar. The difference between the R. Kelly situation and the Bill Cosby situation is that if you listen to R. Kelly's lyrics,
It's very problematic.
you
He's
listen
literally
to it and you be
saying,
like, "Oh my God, I would have
yeah,
never thought."
yeah,
Right? Aaliyah's a year older than me. Was a year older than me, right? So we're the same generation.
yeah,
And listening to her first album is hard for me. And I love her music, and I'm so glad it's available on streaming platforms now after all these years. But that's hard because the words.
yeah,
Bill Cosby never made an
yeah. Very
episode
true.
about drugging and raping women,
Very true.
right? And I do believe that no means no.
Mm,
I do believe that Bill Cosby has some indiscretions, but in within the context of drugging and raping, I think the woman that he was convicted of doing that to in like 2004 or something, um, I think she was in the latter years of all of this. Um, he probably did, I don't want to say drug her, right? I think that when you partying, and at that time period, everybody was partying, everybody was taking drugs.
mm,
You wake up with regret, and feeling uncomfortable because you don't know what happened. I don't think that that necessarily is what you. I don't look at that as rape in the same context as someone being forced and violated and saying no repeatedly and all the things. So, and that's
And
why you
I
have
always
the
think
pseudo.
about like the reverence that his wife and Felicia Rashad have for him, and like the amount of respect they have for him, like
Yeah.
still. And yeah, if the closest people to him have that sort of reverence and the way they see him and the way he really loved his wife, you have to sort of put that into perspective.
No, you don't. Serial killers really love their mamas.
And I don't feel that's Norman Bates kind of vibe, but
I
um,
mean, and we can take it out of the fiction and put it into the nonfiction, right? I believe that Jeffrey Dahmer loved his mama. I
mm,
believe that oh gosh, Timothy McVeigh loved somebody, right? But that doesn't mean, and I believe they were loved, right? Ted Bundy was loved, but I don't believe that that absolves anyone of guilt. I think
mm,
what my internal conflict, when it comes to how what like the Cosby Show raised me, a different world raised me, right? My conflict is the time that it took for people to come forward,
mhm,
and then how the book was thrown, but regardless of the time. And I've never had that experience of, you know, being raped or drugged or anything like that. But there is a certain amount of responsibility that comes with um as a woman taking care of yourself and your mental health and things. So you sat and you suffered for 30 years. Like that is, I mean, so I'm not saying it didn't happen, but it was just the way it all rolled out, and
mm,
everybody started coming out the woodworks, but nobody was saying nothing in 1990 when it was the number one show on TV. You know, in 1987 when he created a spinoff that was wildly successful. So that's where I struggle and I battle with, and I have no hard response when someone says, "Well, do you think Bill Cosby did it? Do you think Bill Cosby's guilty?" All I can say is I still watch the Cosby Show in a different world every day, because I don't look at him as Bill Cosby
so like
on when I'm
okay,
watching it.
in terms of
But
like Bill Cosby and how that show was so influential, do you think a lot of people began to model themselves after that family?
mm, I wouldn't say model after the family. I think we aspired
Mm,
to achieve more, and we
mm,
believed we could achieve more, right? And that I think what is the biggest thing. You know, there was a 150% increase in applicants to historically black colleges and institutions, and I could definitely be wrong with how extreme that number is, but it's a huge number, um, because of a different world, because
mm,
of the Cosby Show, because of the images that we saw, and not just the individuals, right, but also the clothing, right, the jobs that people held, the characters held on the show. And I can go on and on, but I want to go back to the history of film because we were really wanting to get dig into representation in film,
okay.
and just to say that, you know, when films first started, it you know, of course they were silent films,
Mhm,
and there was no sound. And when sound came about, you know, the first person to speak on film was Al Jolson in The Jazz Singer in 1927. And don't ask why I still remember all this stuff, by the way. I have not looked up any of this recently. I just took a lot of film classes in undergrad, which was like 20 years ago. But anyway, so I I found it interesting when you learn the history of that particular actor, and that
mm,
he used to dress in blackface because he didn't have stark European features, if that makes sense. He had texture to his hair. You know, he had fuller lips. He had a bit of a rounder nose. You can Google Al Jolson, you know, but he dressed in blackface, and that was how a lot of people made money. I want to say he was Jewish, um, which is kind of, you know, the origin of those features. But it wasn't until, maybe the 1930s that we began to see actual black people, right, on
Mm,
in film. But in seeing actual black people in film, they were still in like subservient roles. And I mean, I want to say you saw them in like the 20s and things like that, but they were always background
yep.
characters. They didn't have a large performance role, right? And so having roles in the 1930s, where even though they were domestics, they were speaking, and they were, and it showed positive images, and it wasn't just the Sambo type, it wasn't just the pickaninny stereotype, it wasn't just the comedic buffoon, wanting to please everybody, Uncle Tom type either.
Mm,
And even though the Uncle Tom type was always the person who wanted to aspire to be like a white person, um, it wasn't that. It just, I like the fact that, at least Hattie McDaniel played a role that black women actually were serving in that time period, as opposed to her being overly sexualized or being downtrodden and things like that. So if you've seen the film Gone with the Wind, which I haven't seen in a very long time, but I always remember, her having a command of the house,
mm,
her being that primary matriarchal type in a subservient role, though. So then you fast forward through time, and you start to see, um filmmakers come out of this, right? And when you think about how we've gotten to where we are now, we couldn't have gotten to where we are now without so many people who paved the way in film and television, for that matter. But in film in particular, yeah, you have the actors, right? You have the
mm,
actors, but then you have people like Gordon Parks. You have people like Melvin Van Peebles. You have people who were physically filming their own movies in the late 60s and 70s, right? You have people who were writing the scripts. You have people who were directing the films. And you can't just dismiss their contributions. And then you move into the Julie Dashes, and people like that in the 80s, and of course Spike Lee, and as they call them, the Black Pack, when it
mm.
comes to comedic filmmaking. And what Robert Townsend, Keenan Ivory Wayans, and help me Jesus, um why can't I think of that child's name? The
What
third
child?
member of the Black Pack. Robert Townsend. And there's one more. Oh, it'll come to me. I'll yell it out as soon as it does. But you have them, making these comedic films, and they're using their own money, you
Mm,
know, and so you're seeing films that have primarily black characters, and they're not, even though they may not be dramas, but they are comedic, that have a dramatic component, right? That have an action component, like I'm gonna get you, sucker, you
mm,
know, a film like that, or films that are showing you how Hollywood sees us, right? In Hollywood Shuffle, so when you have those, you have people who are who had one gone to college, got an education and learned how to work the system. So black representation where it is today in film has come because so many people did the legwork, right? To get us to where we are, and we still have a ways to go. We really do.
it's interesting because like I was obviously born in the 90s, and a lot of the visual representation of black men that I saw, or black people, not just men,
Hmm.
were they were in college, like The Real World, like you mentioned, The Cosby Show, The
Hmm.
Best Man, Love and Basketball, um, so many amazing like black movies, and it was that um importance of going to HBCU, learning about your history, and just forming that brotherhood and kinship that was sort of displayed. Then outside of that, but sometimes the way I received those movies where they were sometimes not big blockbuster movies, and the big blockbuster movies were the ones where, if it was a horror movie, for example, the black character will be killed first,
Mhm,
or there'd be a slave in the movie, or just those subservient roles like you mentioned that was happening back in the day. But
mhm,
I mean, for the past probably 15 years or 20 years now, there's obviously been a change, and it happens. Apparently, there's a cycle that happens with sort of Hollywood and black cinema, where there's a rise in like positive representation, and then there'll be a decline. I feel like we're currently in a rise with black content being made, like with the Insecure and the Atlanta and the all the amazing other content that's being made. And so
mhm,
we're right now at Black Panther, for example, we're in that moment right now. So do you do you think this moment is just going to keep going, or do you think we're going to fall again into that cycle of, okay,
mhm,
we're not making as much money, black movies are not selling as much, and there's going to be that decline, or do you think this momentum is just going to keep going and it won't stop?
mhm. Two things. One, the Black Pack, Eddie
Okay.
Murphy, Arsenio Hall, Robert Townsend, and Keenan Ivory Wayans.
I googled it, but I wasn't sure Eddie Murphy was in it, so I was just quiet,
Yeah.
like, okay, I don't know, so
Oh
I'm not going
yeah.
to say anything.
Yeah. Because if you understand what the Rat Pack and who was in the Rat Pack, right, and
Yeah.
all the things that they brought, each person, everybody brought something, but those gentlemen actually personified, moving the conversation and moving the needle and how we are portrayed, and how we what we will and will not accept, in terms of roles, and how we won't settle, right? And yeah, you could say all you want that Eddie Murphy sold out here, and Arsenio sold out here, blah blah blah, whatever. Keenan Wayans had a show on Fox, he sold out to the man, things like that. But when you really look at it, were it not for these gentlemen in these particular lanes of Hollywood, right? There were no black talk show hosts at night
Mm,
after Nat King Cole, and he only lasted a year. There
mm,
were none. So for Arsenio to do what he did and to bring black culture to the masses, right? The way that he did, that was really powerful because I mean, I'm not saying white people didn't watch Soul Train, right? But Soul Train was a primarily black audience, right? And even though it was a nationally syndicated show for many years, but white people love late night talk shows.
mm,
That's a given, right? So for him to take that mantle and do what he did with it, and the reason he was canceled had nothing to do with his ratings, had nothing to do with with him as a person, right? It had to do with a guest, a controversial guest. So you think
mm.
about that,
What
and
happened?
oh, he brought on the minister Louis Farrakhan, and they
Okay.
told him not to. Similar to Debbie Allen in A Different World,
Mm,
they asked her not to do a show about the LA riots, and she did it anyway. And that led to the downward spiral of A Different World, and not being, because they were not doing poorly in ratings when they were canceled.
mm.
So it ain't always about ratings. But but I'm saying all that to say, going back to your question, about where I think we're going, I think having gone through the ebbs and flows of representation, and the back behind the scenes of different films and whatnot, and our hand in making these amazing films and winning all these different, and we still have black first to come, right? And I'm so tired of that, by the way. I mean, I welcome it because I love the fact that we are, getting our due. But my gosh, the fact that we still have black first, in Hollywood is it's just, I don't know, it's annoying. But we need it. We have to get there. Somebody got to be first. So
I mean, it's
I
crazy
think,
that Halle Berry is still the only black female that's won the Best Actress, no?
yeah,
She's the only one that we should have gone to Angela Bassett this past award season, but
it would have been supporting for her, right? So you have
mm,
to also think about, so um Viola Davis winning for, I believe, was best supporting, for Fences. And you have Octavia Spencer, best supporting, and
Mm.
Monique, best supporting, and Whoopi. I love Whoopi, by the way.
Yeah, Whoopi's
Best
amazing.
supporting. So yeah, and I believe Hallie deserved that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of controversy around that character and, the role that she played. But I also felt like Sean Combs should have gotten more attention to the small role he played too. If we can credit Viola Davis with her 45 seconds on screen in Doubt with snot running down her nose, you mean to tell me that we can't take this young man who we all thought was just a music person,
Mm.
and for him to play a death row inmate? And I mean, I don't feel like he got his just due, and it's been talked about in different circles anyway. But I say all that to say that I don't know if we'll ever devolve in
Mm.
our representation. I don't know, because we tired of this shit, you know. And I'm not saying that I don't want to see the slave movie, right? I'm not saying
I
that.
don't want to see none of that.
Yeah,
Like
because
anything black trauma is done
it's
no more.
and so there
We've
are
seen
still
enough.
people. Let me be very clear though. There are still people who think the Holocaust didn't happen, right?
Mm.
So I don't hear Jewish people saying we don't want no more Holocaust movies. And there are people who think that black people have for real overcome, and they're okay, and why they keep complaining, right? Still. So unfortunately, those films are necessary. There are people who don't want black history and slavery taught in schools like today, right now. They're removing historical books from schools. So until people actually acknowledge that my ancestors were brought here in chains and they built this joint for free, yes, if you need to make a slave movie, as long as the storyline is good, and now we can jump into Birth of a Nation, 20, was it 2017 or
16,
2016,
I think.
um we can do that. But yeah, those stories need to be told. you know if Unfortunately it didn't stay in theaters and it wasn't shown as much as I think it should have been. But when you go to the National Museum of African American History and Culture, affectionately known as the Blacksonian here in Washington D.C., it's the only museum that is full of all things Black history in America. The only one that exists like that. There's an international African American history museum in South Carolina, but that really talks about more so the transatlantic slave trade and its relationship with South Carolina, because more people came through there than any other place on the transatlantic slave trade. But to have the Blacksonian have Nat Turner's Bible, and for people to not know who Nat Turner was, and these are Black people who could have been his descendants. That's why Birth of a Nation story needed to be told. For young Black people to think, well, why didn't they just fight back? Why they just take it? There are young Black people who say that in this country. So yeah, I'm sorry, but we need as many um uh accurate stories told. Yeah, it do I need to watch every slave movie? No.
Like,
I
for
don't need
example, The Woman King, it sort of
to.
tells a different perspective of slavery and how, it was a reluctant sort of um, moment where a community was forced into having to give people in the community away, and then there was
Mhm.
this whole revolt, and strong women soldiers that are fighting against the enemy, the ops, and that
Yeah.
kind of story I like, because there are
Mhm.
many stories like that. Like, even with Nigeria, for example, there are so many stories of fighting back the colonization, and we have this amazing story on Netflix about the history of colonization and how communities really did try to fight, but there was just better weapons, and that that Africans just could not fight against, and that was what caused the eventual overtaking of the nation. But
But where
that,
does
in my
that
perspective,
leave the African that was brought to America?
what do you mean?
So you're saying you don't want to see other slave any more slave movies, right? But we had 400 years of building this country here in America. We as descendants of African slaves brought here in chains. Where does that leave our stories? Where does that because 12 years a slave is a very specific story.
Mhm.
People were not captured and put into free people were not captured and then put into slavery, right? That was not the common thing, right? So the birth of a nation, to see how this man who was a man of God struggled with where his people were and felt like I'm a man like he's a man, so why does he get to rape my wife?
Mm.
you know and then you have other films that are talk about specific storylines like the Harriets and things like that, yeah, those stories need to be told because people really didn't know certain things about Harriet Tubman. They
Yeah,
really thought, I mean, to
you're
this day people think that Cicely Tyson playing Miss Jane Pittman was Harriet Tubman. There are still people who think that, and that's really unfortunate. That Miss Jane Pittman can't be her own person and Harriet Tubman exists as her own person. So I say all that to say that I don't think that it's necessarily we don't need more slave movies. We don't need more fictional stories told. We don't need the magical Negro in these slave movies. We don't need more stories that have a fictional character inserted, like in the film Rosewood, to save the day. Tell the story.
or Django.
Tell the story. No, Django was a fictional story, right? And I think that because the filmmaker is a white man, I really don't give Django a lot of energy when having these types of discussions about representation. But I
Mm.
love the film. I love the
Mm.
actors in the film. I felt like it gave a new type of storyline when talking about slavery, right?
Mhm.
Because people make it seem like once somebody was sold off, the family had to move on or they just died or whatever. And nah, this man, he literally teamed up with this bounty hunter and looked for his wife.
Mhm.
Like people kind of forget that because you get so caught up in, you know, uh Django killing all these white people and
Yeah,
freeing
but
all
it's
these
really a
slaves,
love story about coming back to get his wife, coming back to get his
you
woman.
know,
Yeah.
and not giving up and holding on to what he remembered with that relationship, and then creating this brilliant plan, in all honesty, and it would have worked
It fell apart.
had the
If
white guy
yeah, just
not had
calm
a whole
down.
mental health break. But
It was just triggered too much. He couldn't hold it. He just was like, "No, I'm sorry,
yeah, he was
Jamie."
almost there, dude. So, but that is, but then you still have, roles played by beloved actors in that film that were problematic, but you still had people like that existed then. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with a slave movie as long as it's told in a way that people aren't only feeling the trauma of it, right? um I definitely applaud um Will Smith for the film Emancipation.
Okay.
People were like, "Oh God, another slave movie, another slave movie," and I just wonder how many of those people that had an issue with another slave movie actually watched Emancipation. And I don't need personally. It doesn't. I hate to say it like this, but it's not about Nigerians watching American films about slavery as much as it's about the people who are descendants of those people not knowing that these people actually did what they did, and the impact of the image of that man's back. I remember studying the transatlantic slave trade as an undergrad student, because I have a minor in Black Studies, and seeing that image, like, oh my gosh, you know and so I think that there are people who need to hear and need to see, and you don't know what film is going to touch home. So,
Mm. It's a good
but
point. It's a good point. To be fair,
you
it's a
said
good
I don't want
point.
to see a slave movie, but you know what I can do without
What?
is I don't need if I don't want to see another story just about thugging and drugging in the hood without
Mm.
lessons and without some underlying like aha moments, you know. Um that's what I can't deal with just for the sake of doing it because it's gonna sell. I want more than that, and that's what I'm glad that I don't think that's why I say we're not. I don't see us devolving. I think we're
Mm.
going to evolve and build on what already exists, right? So you look at a film by the brilliant R.I.P. John Singleton, and you look at
Mm.
Boys in the Hood, and you look at some of the things that are glorified, the violence and all these different things, right? And the drugs and all this stuff. But then you look at Lawrence Fishburne's character, who literally had a whole sermon on an empty lot. I had never heard of the word gentrification. That film came out when I was 11 years old. Never heard of that word before in my life. My family to this day cannot tell you what gentrification means. But in
Mm.
that film, Lawrence Fishburne's character, Furious Styles, defines gentrification.
Yeah.
That's why we need more because
Yeah. We
people
need
ain't
more
listening to that.
fathers like that in movies. Just that role that Lawrence played. We need more of that in movies because he was a very powerful present father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people miss that. People miss the single black mother that had to let go of a relationship with her son to better herself and stay in school and earn a master's degree. People miss that. So yeah, we need more movies now because ain't nobody gonna want to see that same movie in 2023 for the first time. So we have to have that movie updated to 2023 with still the foundations of those characters. So maybe the mama had to be online in school getting her
Mm.
master's from Grand Canyon University or something. That's a
And
commercial.
maybe Maurice Chestnut just went left instead of right.
No, there has to be there has to be a martyr. You
uh,
know, there has to be a martyr because those people really were murdered just
mm.
because, right? Because he looked at somebody wrong. I have a high school somebody from a high school class and somebody that I grew up with in my neighborhood. One killed the other one because he looked at him wrong. Yeah, those things really did happen. So I don't see anything wrong with it. That's why the film, I mean the a TV series Snowfall was so brilliant because in woven in to all the glitz and glamour and I'm gonna shoot this person, blah blah blah, were these like moral lessons that a lot of people got because it's 2023. This is why we cannot do away with certain depictions in media because we have to be able to say, okay, I understand. I already know that this is bad, right? I've seen Boys in the Hood, blah blah blah, right? I've already seen, rappers die and do overdoses or whatever. But then you have the young man who accidentally murdered a child and how his life went after that and how he didn't want to be in that life anymore, but he felt he had to. Is all he knew. And he was able to protect an entire community because he
Is it The
reverted
Shy?
back to that life. Huh?
Is this from The Shy?
No, this is from Snowfall.
Oh, okay. Because a similar story happened in The Shy where someone mistakenly killed a kid because he thought he killed his
Yeah.
son.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
okay.
that's totally different when it comes to the crack epidemic in the 80s. So
Mm.
Snowfall was set in the 80s, right? It was created by John Singleton, and a lot of the earlier seasons were directed by him, and then he passed away suddenly,
Yeah.
unexpectedly. But no, there is an entire character that his life took a different turn. He had a whole different outlook on life
Mm.
after having that traumatic experience. So we say we don't want to see any more Black trauma, right? But Black trauma is not just slavery, right? It's not just the KKK. It's not just racism. It's a lot of times Black trauma is self inflicted.
Mm.
And young people, unless you see it in today's time, they're not going to believe it exists.
That's really interesting. It's really interesting. Also, what I was also thinking was because America is such an aspirational nation where one of the themes is anyone can make it, and so it would be nice to see more content around black men who rose from the dirt and that made it, that kind of content. And I'm trying to think of content around people making it. There probably are a lot of them, but I can't. Can you think of any right now of someone who just probably that one with Will Smith and Jaden? What was that movie called again?
Hmm. The Pursuit
Uh,
of
The
Happiness.
Pursuit of Happiness, where he made it in the end, didn't he? He got a lot of money, he became a rich man.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I feel like movies like that too are important because that's also representation, and that's also
Hmm.
something that would be a positive thing for people to see. So yeah.
Yeah, I think so. But there's a lot of when you think about stories like that, those stories are based on a real person, right?
Mm,
So you also have to take into account that you have to have an audience for it, So you say you want to see more of that, but does the masses, will it
mm,
make money? It's a reason why Hollywood is on strike right now,
mm.
because of the distribution of wealth in Hollywood is very lopsided.
Very true.
So, um, so yeah, thinking of things. I wish you had asked me this in advance. I would have been more prepared. Um, but
It's okay.
uh, pull yourself up by the bootstraps type. And I really hate that analogy because it's not. What if you don't have? What if you can't afford boots? What if you can't afford the boots with the straps, right? Um, so not everybody is afforded the opportunity to do a Rubik's cube in a cab with the CEO or the stock brokerage that you want to work for. No one is. Not everyone is afforded the opportunities like Chris in the Pursuit of Happiness.
Okay. I
So,
have I have one more
mhm,
question,
mhm,
which we see a lot of movies or creators like Tyler Perry,
mhm,
and when they do Medea or Lawrence Martin Lawrence when he did Big
mhm.
Mama's House,
Uh-huh.
and there's that um black men dressing up as women and
Mhm.
being outlandish and over the top and being in movies, and there's some conversation around that being problematic. What do you what how do you see being an American woman? How does that what kinds of conversations do you have about that?
I think that the outlandish you know, term and the over the top is it's slightly homophobic and transphobic.
Mm.
Um there are, you have to one, they're making comedy, you
Or
know.
white chicks. Okay, what about even white chicks?
They're making comedy. Also, if you are a black person who grew up in America, you can't tell me you ain't never met a Medea or a Big Mama.
Yeah, it's
And
everywhere.
yeah, and so if the personality was exaggerated a bit to get laughs, it's a comedy.
Mm.
I don't watch a lot of Medea films, but that he doesn't make films for me, you know. And you have to know that you're not going to be the audience for everybody.
Exactly.
The
The fact
people
that
that
he's making it, there's obviously an audience that's watching it.
oh yeah,
That's yeah.
I got a
But
whole
he keeps
family of them.
making it.
Yeah, I got a
Keeps
whole
making
family
it.
of them. So yeah,
Yeah.
but he ain't making it for me.
Mm.
There are films that he's made that I actually like. I
Yes,
love
same here.
the Single Mothers Club, Single
Mm.
Mom,
Single Moms
what is
Club.
it? Yeah, Single Moms Club. I
Diary of
love
a Black
Family That
Mad
Prays.
Woman. Yeah.
No, I don't. Yeah,
No?
it's okay.
Wow. No, no.
It
That's
has
like
its issues for me,
no.
but
That's the
again, he don't
best.
make everything for me.
Yeah, I get
But
that.
I love Medea's Family Reunion.
Yes, yes. That
You
was a good
know,
movie.
um so I think about things, and then I'm noticing too that he is not forcing things as much as he used to in his more
Mm.
recent films, aside from like the Medea stuff or whatever. But yeah, because I'm a thinker and I'm a cerebral person. I don't need you to show me a film that is basically a play on video.
Mm.
It's a little too much telling. I like to figure things out a little bit, please. So things like that. But and it's really hard because I was more prepared to talk about social media in films.
Yeah, I know.
Um,
But with this kind of conversations, it just goes with the flow. You can also
yeah,
put
yeah, I
something that
know,
can
I
be
know. I'm
read.
just
You
saying,
know.
I wish that I had thought about a film where someone started out with
I mean,
nothing.
Missed Out Fire is a film by I can't remember his name now. That amazing, legendary, iconic actor.
Robin
And
Williams, honey.
there you go. Thank you.
Mhm.
And I feel like he did all of that before all of Martin Lawrence. And wait, but even in what's that series Martin Lawrence had with Gina? He always had Shaniqua or some lady. Do you know that?
Shanae.
Shanae. So it's always existed, and I don't
And
think there was.
again, Shanae was based on Martin's sister.
Yeah.
you know so you say that these over the top and these why are these men putting on dresses, and an actor that I know personally, and I won't say names or the film, but put on a dress and he said his career went down
Oh,
after.
we all know who that is.
No, we all
He was
don't.
in Big Mama's. He was in Big Mama's house too. He was
I will
in.
say that there was a film that this person was in, and again, he's a personal friend, so I don't like to get into all that, but and his career went to shit. And he claims, right, but
Yeah.
when you can claim that, but when you look at the bigger picture, you had other things going on in your life too that led
Mm.
to your
To
career
be
taking
fair,
a.
okay, I just feel like because I've heard that story before. I mean, probably not the same guy. Because I was gonna say someone
Mhm.
who said something similar to what you said.
Probably. So,
Had
but my
it
point
was in
is,
like
it's not
Hollywood movie,
about
like.
who it is, right? My
Mm,
point is that I think that because I don't think that Martin Lawrence's career went
no,
left after he did
no,
Big
it
Mama's
didn't.
House.
He did
You
so
know,
many movies after that.
I
Like
don't
it
think
was
that
like number
Patrick
one.
Swayze's career went left after he did Tu Wong Fu. Thanks for
Or Eddie
everything,
Murphy.
Julie Newmar. So that's what I'm saying. I don't think that that is necessarily it. I mean, when you have your own social and political feelings about certain types of people and things like that, that has now plays a role in how you look at things, right?
Mm,
And so when I'm like listening, in a private setting, and I'm listening to this story, and I was like, you cool, but nah,
yeah.
that ain't. I don't think that was it. Um, but yeah, I had a gentleman the other night tell me that uh Martin Lawrence and he didn't even get the name right, but Tisha Campbell were in an intimate relationship, and that's why she left the show at the end. And I was like, that's not true. Like, don't just make stuff up because you're trying to sound smart. No, it wasn't. And Martin has even had to apologize to her privately and publicly because he let drugs take over his judgment, and he was making inappropriate advances at this woman because he was on drugs. So a lot
But did she
of
like
times,
file? I'm sorry, just like
a
she
harassment
filed the
suit, and she,
lawsuit. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, she had to file a harassment suit and have a restraining order.
That- that's kind of
You
major though.
know, but he was in a really dark place, and he was
Mm,
he was abusing drugs. He said that. He said it in his comedy special. He almost died. He was in a coma for a little bit,
yeah,
trying to make one of the Big Mama houses because he was overheated and not taking
yeah,
care of himself. And then he did a comedy special, and he said he was the whole line was, I was on that ooh wee. That's actually the popular line from that special. And I'm like, why would you say she didn't want to end her marriage and all this kind of stuff? But they were really intimate. No, they were not. So I just say all that to say that I will never say just because a man put a dress on in a film. Like I said, Patrick Swayze, Wesley Snipes, and John Leguizamo all did
Wesley Snipes. That's
amazing
true.
jobs. And I almost watched that last night, by the way. I ended up getting on a long call, but I love that film. Because Noxzema, honey, Noxzema was giving it to us. But after that film, Wesley Snipes did Blade.
Yes, one of the best
So you mean to tell
superhero
me
movies.
that he put on a dress,
Hmm.
right? And he had his career like took off not because of the dress, but that was the trajectory he was on. You just went on that trajectory, bro. That's it.
Mhm. Yeah, very true.
And there are things that we do to sabotage our own relationships with people, with the gatekeepers, we sabotage our own careers.
Mm,
um Sorry, that's my dryer. But I don't believe that. I think that was just an excuse, and I don't do excuses. So like,
okay. So, because originally the conversation was meant to be black representation and social media, so let's steer the conversation to social media now, and
sure.
let's uh, let's see the influence of how social media has sort of affected the way content is being made, or the stories in the content being made, and how it's being consumed.
Hmm.
So,
What was
like
the
for
question?
so a conversation about how social media plays a role in content being made, the content itself, and how we receive the content. So, for example,
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking about this earlier, Gossip Girl, the new, even the previous iteration of Gossip Girl, how social media was very infused in the story, and and how that was really the driving force with the story. Social media and the effects of social media in terms of our mental state, and how
Mm-hmm.
influential it is, how influential it is in terms of relationships, how influential it is in terms of a career, and how we see ourselves. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so, so that was just something I thought we could have a conversation about. And obviously,
Okay.
we mentioned a couple of movies around social media, like
Mm-hmm.
the movie with I'm gonna say the Nia Long movie again with Stormy
Storm Reed.
Storm Reach, thank you very much. And how social media was used and infused in that movie. And
Mm-hmm.
there's also another movie with by sorry, another series by Issa Rae called Rap Shit, where every episode is infused with characters using social media to connect with their audience in the movie, and we're watching this. And so yeah, what do you
Mm-hmm.
think about
Um.
all of that?
So you said a lot, right? So let's unpack. Let's break it down a little bit for the viewers and the listeners, right? So you first spoke about content creation, because I don't look at films as content, right? I think of content or things that live on like social media platforms.
Mhm,
Um, so film contains storylines, right? And plots and twists and all the things. But but filmmaking is shifting, because you have YouTube, you have iPhones that do, you have iMovie, you know,
mhm,
and I mean, you have Android that does this and can do the same things. And so I think that I mentioned the Black Pack, and I mentioned Robert Townsend, and he made this cult classic film called Hollywood Shuffle. Robert Townsend made that film and used his credit cards. He basically charged up every credit card he could to pay people, to get locations, to get the lights and the cameras, all the things, right? Because he because this is 1985, 86, or whatever, and there were no iPhones, right? And you think about how so many breakout stars have come from a social media platform called YouTube, right?
mhm,
And now they're coming from TikTok, and you see where things are going. And there are a lot of films outside of just Missing, the film that stars Storm Reed and Neil Long. Films outside, I mean, shows outside of Rap Shit, the Issa Rae created series. And then you have other films that also, sorry, that also have like the text bubble pop up, right? That also have emojis pop up in different places. I think even the Sex and the City spinoff and Just Like That has it every now and then,
yeah,
right?
it does.
Um, but all of that comes from the thought bubbles that pop up in cartoons, right? And they've done it in other films years ago, even, and you have that. But in terms of of having the availability and the bandwidth to create this content, a great example of that, and this isn't a film, but it's a series, and it was a beautifully crafted concept, is Bel Air. And I'm a little biased because I'm from Kansas City, and the creator of Bel Air, Morgan Cooper, is from Kansas City. But uh,
But
you
Fresh
have
Prince Bel Air, is that one?
so let's keep them
Is that a
separate,
different one?
right? No, Bel Air is the dramatic interpretation of the Fresh Prince of Bel Air,
Yeah,
right? And it streams on Peacock.
yeah. Are you saying a different one?
No, I'm
Oh, same one. Okay, okay. Just trying to be clear because
yeah. So you have this idea, right? That was like a little music video vignette type thing. Like, what if Fresh Prince of Bel Air was gritty and dark? What if Jeffrey was that dude,
yeah,
that you don't want to mess with? I
yeah.
love Jimmy, by the way. I took a picture with him. Uh, you know,
Okay.
um,
I
and
like that. I like the new Bel Air. It's very
right.
interesting. Very.
But don't get me wrong. I watch Fresh Prince of Bel Air all the time because it's on so many stations, in syndication. But it's a whole new look of it, right? And it all started from Morgan Cooper posting this little 3-minute what if, you
Mm,
know, and Will Smith saw, well, somebody got it to Will Smith, and then he was like, yo,
okay, I
this
think
is
I remember
dope.
that. I think I remember seeing that, like a dark trailer for like a Bel Air series. I think I remember seeing that actually.
Well, yeah. So what I'm saying though is that came out of social media.
Mm,
He posted that. It wasn't even on. I don't think TikTok was out back then. I
no, I
think it
don't
was
think
like on
so. It's
Twitter.
on YouTube or something.
I think it was on Twitter. Well,
Mm,
people start sharing the YouTube link on Twitter, and it just gained momentum, right? So when you look at how social media has, like Issa Rae, now she's a film star. She plays the president of the United States in the new Barbie movie.
that's right.
Where did Issa Rae start?
YouTube.
YouTube, Misadventures of an Awkward Black Girl.
That's right.
So you think about the how social media has been this springboard for so many amazing black, and I mean across the diaspora. When I say, so I'm Black American, right? And even though in your country y'all don't do Black
We're
Nigerian because
African.
that's like an oxymoron because all y'all Black.
Yep.
In countries, that don't have all Black people, you got to say that. Like, I'm a Black Brit or something
Mm,
like that, right?
yeah.
So, but I think about Black representation across the diaspora. I think about, how there are Black American actors and actresses that always credit maybe their relatives or their mom who immigrated here from Jamaica or Trinidad with, how they can stay focused and get things done. And, Shirley Ralph does it a lot. She makes it very clear where her people are from and how she gets her work ethic. And I think about people who come here, and I'm going to be very clear. When you look at uh some of the origins of some of our favorite actors and how they got to where they are, right? And it does tell me that it's changing the narrative, and it's changing how we not only are viewed by other people, but I care more about how we view ourselves
Mm,
first. And that's why I said we need some of those horrible traumatic stories, because our young people don't know. They walking around here just killing each other like it ain't nothing. But going back to the social media part, it's so many things that are coming down the pike that are the brainchild from a platform somewhere. And that's exciting. That is, it makes you believe that the kids are all right. You know,
mm,
it makes you think there's hope in the future. And we're not raising just rappers, but we're
yeah.
also raising moguls, you know. And so when these hashtags come out, for different phrases maybe that come from somewhere, or when these hashtags come out for these films that are so popular and they're trending, you have to, like, participate in that, because that's what keeps our stories on the minds and on the lips of the gatekeepers in Hollywood, Bollywood, Nollywood, all of them, right? And I think I was talking, we had spoken before about Ariana DeBose and her doing this song, and talked about Angela Bassett did that. I think it's something like that. She
Yeah,
said the line. And then Angela Bassett then said it in
I guess
her
I did that.
speech. And she said, I guess I did that,
Yeah,
but Ariana performed that song at the BAFTA Awards, if I'm not mistaken. And for her to do it at the British Film Awards and not the Oscars or the Globes or the SAG or whatever, that tells you that our representation is evolving, and things when things are going viral, that's something to you have to take stock in, and you have to tip your hat to some of these the positive things, but when things are when these concepts and these young people are like posting their homemade videos that they've done, but you even go as far as think about comedians and people who do these little have all these characters they play and all these different things, and influencers and all these people that are now pouring in to film content, film stories. When you think about that, it makes it gives you a new sense, a renewed sense, right, of how we're represented in media as a whole, and how films are getting more and more creative on how they are integrating social media into their storylines, into how the you get to see the sausage making process in a way, right? The behind the scenes a little bit, and it's a part of the movie at times. So yeah, I think that that's super dope. And then you have social media being used, like in the film The Blackening, and you and I both have seen it.
yeah.
And how, I remember they asked the guy, well, how are you invited? And he was like, I got an evite, you know. And when but they're on their phones, or they're trying to get a signal, right? And they're trying to see, how can I post somewhere, can I do this, can I do that? Like, the role of us being wanting to stay connected through social media and how it's being portrayed on film, I think is really masterful, and it's evolving, and I'm not opposed to that. But I don't think that we're going to ever revert back to like horrible representations, and it's going to be widely accepted. I think with the Black Lives Matter movement, and with the uprisings around the country, I'm sorry, around the world, after the killing of unarmed Black men and women, I don't think that we will ever just revert back to the way it was. And I think that for the most part, because you said we always go up and down, up and down. I believe that the down in like the 80s or 90s came out of, I don't think that there were Black filmmakers making that the down part, right? And but when the masses are consuming it, they don't care who, I read credits. I don't know about you, but
Yeah,
I
I
read
think
credits.
yeah, I think the main thing now is there's so much diversity in the behind the scenes, in the writers' room, the
Yeah,
directors' room, the content, the idea rooms, but compared to before, where it was just not diverse and it was just mostly white, powerful, strong, rich men or women.
yeah,
But now there's that diversity, and so there's that influx of amazing new stories, and we're just absolutely rushing to the cinema or to wherever is streaming to consume these movies. And I think this has been an amazing conversation. I
yeah,
think you've just provided so much information about the journey of black representation in cinema. Like, I love how you started this with the history, and I was just here consuming everything. Like, wow, this is amazing. This is perfect, because I didn't know a lot of what you were saying, and it was like it's a lesson, and that's where a lot of the audience or the viewers or listeners will get, because we're learning so much. And a lot of my content consumers are British, Black, African,
mhm,
and are in the arts, and so this is interesting to see that. I'm gonna ask one last question that just
yeah,
popped in my head now.
mhm,
How do Americans feel? Because you're very much in the arts, and you've got connections with people in film and TV. Like, how do you feel about Black British people coming over there and taking the roles?
Taking
Yeah, because I mean, winning, getting the roles, getting not taking, but just
um
getting the roles. Like for example,
you
Snowfall.
don't
Yeah,
have to
was a
give me examples.
yeah.
I know.
Okay.
Uh so
Is there any conversations?
this is what I do.
Do they have conversations about it? Like, oh God.
Oh yeah, for sure. There's a lot of debate. A lot of it happens on social media. I am definitely a part of Black Twitter when I'm always, and I'm not like providing information on Twitter like that because I feel like ain't nobody paying me. But I do participate in the discussion sometimes, or in on private Facebook pages, and I think that the concern is, did they even look, right? Did they consider?
Mm,
And we don't know, to be honest with you. People are speculating, but that's the concern. It's like, you know, why wasn't, why didn't y'all consider an American to, instead of having a British actor learn the accent, right? Um, and then you see my favorite, you see Daniel Kaluuya, and you see how he has a genius level command of language and dialects. And you wonder, is that person out there that could have done that role in that way and had the impact that he had? And I don't think that his abilities, um, I think it's a bonus that he's British, but I don't think his abilities, I think it's just who he is, right? And him being just a brilliant Black man. That's how I look at it. But like, I don't think anybody else could have played Stringer Bell. I don't think I think I don't and don't get me wrong. Um there's a few people that have been thrown around who could have played Franklin Saint, right? And but John Singleton shut that down, and
mm,
and said that, when he auditioned, he became this guy. I mean, the way he just shifted, you know and I think my biggest struggle was with David Oyelowo, when he played Dr. Martin Luther King.
okay.
But there is a certain level of naivete, innocence, and cluelessness that comes with someone who is not a descendant of African slaves brought to America,
Mm,
that allows the filmmaker to mold that person in a way.
mm,
I think honestly there's less work on the part of the filmmaker
okay.
when it comes to those heavier stories of these iconic figures in American history. That's my opinion. Um and that does not take away from David Oyelowo's brilliance, and how and just, you lose him in his characters, like a lot of other British actors, like a lot of other actors in general, in my opinion. But I think that when we talk about taking roles and here and there, like, I mean, I felt some kind of way, when I learned, when I first there's an actor, he's a white actor, but I was like, oh my God, he's British. He's been in so many movies that I like. This kid, he was in Meet the Millers, with Jason Sudeikis, and
Oh yeah, that guy. Yeah.
yeah, this kid, this kid
He's in a
British.
new Marvel movie or like DC movie now, isn't he?
Um,
Um,
Probably DC. But I didn't know until the film Detroit came out, and he talked about his discomfort with some of the scenes that he did with
Will Poulter. That could be his name.
yeah, that's
I
his
think I
name.
said it
But
correctly.
what's the kid Smith? Algie Smith.
Algie Smith.
And
Yes.
he talked about having to like hit this guy and do things to him, and he was like, the I had to like dig deep and find some kind of anger towards people that I've never been angry towards, and like that. I mean, that's also part of acting, right?
Mm,
But he was British. I couldn't believe it, and I believe, and so and this goes to the young man that played the antagonist in Emancipation. So when they did the behind the scenes of Emancipation, and this guy isn't British, but he just talked about the importance of getting his character right. He's the bounty hunter that was tracking Will Smith's character. And while they were rarely in a scene together, they had this conflict throughout the film. But he's an American guy, right? And but he talked about the importance of getting it right because people need to see and understand the mindset of these people,
mm,
the white people back then. And he said, I had to get it right because I wanted to make sure that I was doing not only the main character's story justice, but also the people who still don't believe, right, that slavery was that bad, who still don't believe that they are racist, right? And he talked about that, and it was on the Red Table Talk, as a matter of fact. And I
mm.
thought that was so dope. And so going to the back to the British actors, I think that because it's similar to you saying, you don't want no more black trauma porn. Is that when you come from a country where everybody looks like you and nobody is telling you that you're less than and treating you like you're less than and creating
But
systemic
but that's
things.
the thing. Like
Mhm.
Africa might not have racism, but there's also systemic
Oh yeah, I know. What I'm saying though, in terms
things in
of,
place where it's
but people,
classism over there. Like,
right, classism, right?
yeah,
And honestly, um, I don't agree with any of that either. But the fact that you can't, so in a classist society, you can fake it in a different way, right?
mm,
You have to be of a specific hue to pass as white, right? You have to have straight hair, lighter eyes, super fair skin to pass, right? But in a classist society, you can lie, cheat, steal,
yep.
you know, and show up in a room and nobody will know. This is a big argument I had with my best friend who is Mexican and Italian. And he talks about trying to make the correlation between being black in America and being a homosexual in America, right? Or being in the
Mm,
LGBTQ plus community. And I'm like, boy, when you walk in a room, don't nobody know you gay. They only know when they ask you, where's your wife? And you be like, my husband or something, right?
yeah.
But when I walk in a room, the first thing they see is that I'm black.
Mm,
And the second thing they see is that I'm a woman. So that's when I have to, that's why I always say, while you may not agree with these stories that a lot of us feel like need to be told because of your lived experience and your background, I do feel that you have a different perspective and there's nothing wrong with that, but understand that there are people who need to see some of these stories, right?
yeah.
And then going back to I want one, I'm all about everybody black. It's room for everybody, right? It's enough money to go around. I'm all for that. And I'm not saying that in order for us to have more money, white people got to have less money, right? I don't
Mm,
believe that. And I'm not a socialist, but I do want a more balanced distribution of wealth, right? You have people like holding on to all this money and then they get tax breaks. That don't make sense. How you getting tax breaks and you make $8 billion a year? You know, that's crazy to me that I mean, I have a sticker on one of my computer on one of my laptop cases that says I pay more in taxes than Donald Trump.
that's crazy.
When I made $60,000 in a year, I paid more in taxes than Donald Trump. 60, that's not a living wage in
Mm,
Washington, D.C. It's not. So I say all this to say that I hope that if the British actor is more qualified and does a better job, um, then so be it. But I hope that they at least look, they
The
look
part. Mm,
for an American actor to play historical American figures. And it's not easy. When again, like I said, when you grew up listening to Dr. Martin Luther King and your grandmother had his picture on the wall and all this stuff, you won't have that same openness to learn as someone who didn't grow up with that. And that's what, and I want to say, I don't want to quote Ava DuVernay, but I want to say I got that idea, that understanding from her and Oprah having a conversation on, one of Oprah's shows. And I was like, I never looked at it like that. Having, and it wasn't that he was British, it was that when he approached the idea of performing this character and getting into character, he had no backstory,
mm,
nothing that muddied the water. Similar to Daniel Kaluuya playing Fred Hampton. It was so I just was shocked, and I had an early screening of it, and I sat there and I watched it, and I'm a big Lakeith fan.
mm,
And my heart just broke for Lakeith having to play that character of all people. But there were so many things I didn't know, and I call myself knowing a lot about Black history, that had occurred to this young man. He was 21.
wow.
21. I just couldn't,
Wow.
I just was like, wow, but I don't know if an American actor would have done Fred Hampton that level of justice. Could have done him justice. I just don't know. And the fact that they look nothing alike,
Mm,
and I forgot that was Daniel Kaluuya, who is a Black Brit. You know, honestly, let's take away nationality. I forget that's Denzel Washington playing Malcolm X. I do, because he did it so convincingly. And so I think it's just about the talent of the actor. And I think that I hope that they are considering young Black men for a lot of these roles, because honestly, but I mean, let's be real though. There are some roles that young Black women are not considered for, and there are Black women overseas that come from, or from, the islands or something, and you don't know till they do an interview because of the accent,
yeah.
change. And I think that when you know more than one language, it's easier for you to adapt to another accent than it is for someone who only speaks one language.
Mm,
Uh, a joke that I tell people often, that my Spanish professor said to us. I was a Spanish major for 2 years when I was in undergrad, but a joke that he said was, what do you call a person who is bilingual? I mean, who speaks two languages, bilingual. What do you call a person who speaks three languages? Trilingual, right? What do you call a person who speaks, like, four or more languages? Multilingual. But what do you call a person who speaks one language? American. And yeah, and we all
But wait,
laugh,
but the Spanish being taught in classes. I'm sure there's French being taught in classes. But
but
wait,
you don't pick up the language. That's why I changed my major.
hmm, that's
Yeah.
interesting. I never thought
You
about
have
that.
to be immersed. You can't just sit
Mm,
in a class. There are people who are linguists who are really good at that, who pick up language and dialects very easily. And I don't know Daniel Kaluuya's process in doing that. I would love to hear him talk about it though, because he's just hilarious anyway. Like he said that he learned how to talk like someone from Ohio when he did a Queen and Slim. He said he went to Costco's and he put
but
an S on
I
Costco.
think that's just how powerful like the American media is because even here in the UK, we all watched American TV and everyone was trying to just mimic the accent, the mannerisms. It's so wild how influential American content is around
Yeah.
the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree. And I mean, it's always amazing to me when I hear um a K-pop singer singing in English, sounding like Taylor Swift. You
Yeah,
know,
or even the way they dance, like
I
that
was gonna that was the next thing,
come
right?
on.
So yeah, I totally get it. I do. I mean, I think it's amazing when I see that there are Asian hair braiders. I
That's
was
just the
like,
power of
oh,
media right there.
hell
It's
no.
wild.
Hmm.
It's so wild.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a really good question, and I think that as you have more Americans on your podcast, on your show, that should be like the okay. Have you ever watched Inside the Actors Studio?
Yes, I don't know if they make it anymore, but I used to watch it so much.
Yeah, he passed away unfortunately,
Oh,
but
oh wow, I didn't even know that.
he got sick. So I was very into Inside the Actors Studio,
Mm.
and I loved the questions at the end of the show, right? And I think that that's something that maybe you can use for your show.
So how does it
Is,
go? What do the last questions always sound like, or what would they like? Because I can't remember.
it'll be like, "What's your favorite curse word?" And
Ah, yes,
what sound do
yes.
you love to hear? And then it says, like, if there is a heaven, what do you want God to say to you? I'm not telling you to use those questions. I'm saying,
Well,
have
you know what? Since you've brought that up now, I think this is the perfect way to
you
wrap
know
up
what?
the. But you know what? Actually, what I was thinking was, I don't know where I saw this from a different podcast, but I think I
Mhm,
would like to integrate something where I ask you to ask the next person a question. Like,
mhm.
what question would you like to ask someone who's the next person I'm going to be speaking to?
I mean, that's really hard because you have different subjects every
Yeah, but it's usually based around film or TV.
okay.
So, yeah. So what would you? And I'm going to show them this clip too. And
Okay. It's two part.
yeah, okay.
Okay. So what is one film or TV show that you would love to have remade? Like, okay, so a reboot. One film and or TV show. That's the first question. And then what is one film or TV show, just one, that it's untouchable?
Great question. Great question.
So
Great
I would
question.
like both. It's a two part, but
Hmm.
yeah, because this is always a debate in different circles of mine on social media and whatnot. Like, you know, oh my God, you could never redo this. Oh my God, I can't believe they're remaking that. Why would they do that? They're messing it up. And
Like for
there's only
example,
one.
Aristocats does not need to be made. They don't need to do nothing to Aristocats. I don't know if
Who?
you've heard Aristocats. You know that Disney cartoon?
I was a cartoon. No,
Yeah, this is like, oh my god.
I've heard
And
of it. Now I think about
the
it.
guy Questlove is remake. He's doing like a live action remake. He's probably producing or directing the live action remake
Oh, that means the
of
soundtrack gonna be dope.
I mean,
Okay,
yes, but it's
so
such an iconic Disney like 80s or early 90s cartoon that I just feel like it shouldn't be touched. The animation is perfect. Everything is perfect. Just like I mean, I'm the Little Mermaid was amazing. Halle Bailey is like just perfection, and she's so.
mhm.
But like the cartoon is, I don't think it should have been touched. It's fine, you know. As much as I love the movie, I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the casting. It was diverse, which
You
is
have a
beautiful.
whole ass show about representation.
Yeah, but
You
I
know how
know, but
many little girls
I'm just saying, like,
were
you know,
inspired by that? I just
yeah.
sent my little cousin a whole backpack, lunch pack, pencil bag set with the Black Little Mermaid
And you
on.
know, my nieces too, like, it was a whole thing. We went to watch in the cinema, like, it was a whole thing. Just like when the first Black Panther came out, and we all went to the cinema all dressed up, like, it's a whole thing. And I understand that, but there could be fresher stories told instead of a
They
remake.
can, but I thought that they did a good job with the freshness of that story.
They did, and
You know
she's a
that I
great actress. Like she didn't need
yeah
to speak. I could. She was perfect in the way she was relaying her emotions on screen. It was very. You just
yeah, and
like you barely realized she wasn't talking. Like it was really good. Yeah,
right. Like most
yeah,
of the movies you didn't even talk.
yeah.
So, but I'm saying, having like it's reimagined, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with having things reimagined, but there are some that you don't want to touch, right?
Uh,
So I can see them redoing Back to the Future. The
Yeah,
person.
I've not seen that one, so I'll happily see Back to the Future again.
I
Yes,
love Back to the
I would
Future.
like to
I'm a
watch that.
big
Yeah,
Michael J. Fox fan. I still
same.
watch Family Ties because it comes on this old station, that shows old stuff. But could you imagine Back to the Future with a black kid?
You know,
Or
Spike Lee made something similar to like a time traveling, like a movie. Did you watch it? It was very
who
where he
did?
had Spike Lee, Spike Jones, like
Spike Lee. Spike Jones is
Spike
a
Lee,
white dude.
Spike Lee, yeah,
Um,
on Netflix, where um um a guy and a girl, teenagers, and something happened, but they were like
but
science
no,
geeks and they created a time
I
traveling being
mean the same
premise.
reimagine Back to the
Yeah,
Future, not just a time traveling thing, right? Reimagine Back to the Future from the perspective of a black kid,
yeah.
you know, or even a Latinx kid. Like I thought the new Transformers was brilliantly done because you have this Latinx young man playing this title role, and I'm such a huge Dominique Fishback character, a
Right.
fan. It's just ridiculous. Anything she's in, I'm gonna watch it. I just like I'll stop everything. So, but I thought that was so cool to have, and I didn't know that Pete Davidson was the lead Autobot voice, right?
Pete Davidson, Kim
From,
Kardashian, Pete Davidson.
from you know
No.
what? He from Saturday Night Live. But yeah, so he was the voice of the Autobot, you know, and I thought that was really cool because I didn't know that until after I saw the movie.
Oh
And I was like,
wow.
"Oh, that was Pete Davidson," because I was trying to figure out who he was, and so that was really cool. And I think that um, there's so many, and that was like a prequel, right? That was from like the mid '90s,
Mm.
and the soundtrack. Oh, I tried to buy it, but the soundtrack don't have all those songs on it. They ain't right for that. But they had they had all the Biggie and the Nas, and they had all those '90s like hip hop tracks from like New York. It was really
Wow. So
cool.
that's what this new Transformers is. It's like a throwback movie. Like, wow. And I'm watching that today too. So that's amazing. I'm really
Oh,
looking
you're
forward
gonna
to
love
that.
it.
Oh wow.
Oh, it's really good. It's really good. I want to see it again. Maybe I'll go see that tonight.
Yeah.
It's Black Restaurant Week here in DC, so I have a
Okay.
date at 7, and I'm
Okay.
like, maybe we can go to the movies after see Transformers again. But yeah, and I just want to eat some chicken because I've been cleansing and eating healthy. Look at my lunch. I'm not all the way done with this. Maybe my lunch tomorrow. My kale salad. I've been drinking my water. My bladder is gonna explode soon, so we're gonna have to wrap up. But
Yes.
but
Yes.
think about questions like you asked me about how do I feel about British people coming to America taking a roles that could have been for Americans. Think about questions like that, those very not so specific to the type of episode you're doing.
Hmm.
I think that would be, and you could be like 3 or 4. It didn't have to be a whole lot, and but I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, I'll definitely take that on board. Thank you so much, Dr. Neosho. And this has been an amazing episode. This I've learned so much. Everyone's gonna learn so much. And please, we have to have another session like this because
Give me a
yeah,
topic.
it's a vibe.
I can
Yes,
talk about
it's a vibe.
anything.
So thank you all very much for watching, for listening, streaming. Thank you, Dr. Neosho. This is the Real Happy Hour podcast, and see you soon. Thank you.
All right.
Nice. Thank you so much. So,
You're
Slate.
welcome.